This little girl begs to be allowed to breathe. The adults laugh. The camera keeps rolling. And a few hours later, she is dead. How could a therapy, supposed to recreate a mother's love, turn into the slow, filmed execution of a 10-year-old child? In the cold of November, the year 1989 opens like a blank page. And on this page, a name is written: Candace Tiara Elmore. She is born on November 19 in Lincolnton, in Lincoln County, North Carolina. A small American town, low houses, quiet streets, factories that close early, and that persistent veil of poverty that clings to the facades like a fine gray dust. In a modest room, under a yellow light that is too harsh, a child's cry splits the air. Candace comes into an already battered world. Her biological mother, Angela, called Angie, lives under the weight of misery. The fridge sometimes empty, bills piling up. Days where one must choose between heating and food. Fatigue that makes every movement heavier. Alcohol, perhaps. Giving up. None of this is written on a birth certificate, but it all shows through in the reports that, later, social services will record, line after line. The files of the Lincoln County Department of Social Services describe a home where attention is lacking, where care is falling apart. Repeated neglect, child left alone, poor hygiene. Neighbors are worried. One call, then two. The administrative machine starts up. Social workers come knocking at the door. They see the disorder, smell the odor of damp laundry, note the lack of sufficient food, notice the child's gaze, too silent, too adult for her age. The first few times, the state still hesitates. Threats, advice, mandatory follow-ups. They hope for a correction, a turnaround, a moment of realization. But the reports pile up like dark clouds. Follow-up visits show the same scene. Stubborn poverty, confusion, inability to offer a stable environment. Finally, a decision falls, sharp as a guillotine. Custody is withdrawn. Candace leaves Angela's house. She is only a few years old, but already she is learning the brutality of separations decided by others. She then enters another world, that of foster care, the system of foster families. A car takes her away, a few plastic bags as all her luggage. One home, then another. One bedroom, then another. Changing faces, changing rules, different laundry scents in each household. She adapts, she resists, or maybe not. She is moved again. Press and hearing reports speak of rotations, of passing from one foster home to another, as if Candace's childhood were fragmenting into successive addresses without any roots. Amid this constant movement, fate takes the form of a woman who has never held a child in her arms. Jeane Elizabeth Newmaker, a nurse practitioner in North Carolina, specialized in pediatrics. She lives alone, single, no biological child. She knows the beating of little hearts on monitors, growth charts, vaccines, the crying in waiting rooms. She knows fragile bodies, but she does not yet know what it is to be a mother in the evening, when the door closes and the silence of the house awaits a breath other than her own. Jeane decides to adopt. In the files, her profile is reassuring. Professional stability, sufficient income, a house in Durham, North Carolina. She fills out the forms, attends interviews, answers official questions about her motivations, her past, her plans. In this labyrinth of documents, a name appears. Candace Tiara Elmore. A child marked by neglect, by the gaps of a love that did not know how to take care. A child to be placed again, to be protected, to be saved, according to the discreet vocabulary of the reports. In 1996, the adoption is finalized. The state stamps, signs, confirms. What was temporary placement becomes legal filiation. Candace leaves the world of foster homes and enters the house of a single mother. With this welcome, her identity is transformed. She is no longer called Candace Tiara Elmore. The official papers, the articles, now call her Candace Elizabeth Newmaker. New name, new home, new city. Durham. Wider streets, a school to join, new classmates. The court records note this administrative metamorphosis, but behind a single line of text, a deeper shift is taking place. That of a child shunted around toward a promise of stability. There, in Durham, Candace settles in. A bedroom, a bed, clean sheets. Enrollment in school, a school file that opens, teachers who mark her presence in the register. Jeane oversees her medical follow-up, appointments at the pediatrician, vaccination record up to date. Then, soon, psychological consultations. Because beneath this appearance of normality, something resists. Witnesses will say that Candace has trouble letting people get close, that she shuts down, that she gets angry. Outbursts erupt. Objects may fly. The reports speak of aggressive, disruptive behaviors, of difficulties in forming a stable emotional bond with her adoptive mother. In the kitchen, words collide. In the car, silences weigh heavy. Sometimes Candace seems indifferent. Sometimes she explodes. Jeane, a nurse who is nevertheless used to children's suffering, finds herself at a loss. She looks for answers. She consults psychologists, psychiatrists in North Carolina. Over the course of the sessions, a diagnosis begins to take shape, an angular, foreign word that tries to contain the enigma of this difficulty to love without fear. Reactive attachment disorder, trouble réactionnel de l'attachement. It is mentioned in offices, in reports, in later analyses. Psychiatrists suggest that a childhood marked by neglect, by unstable homes, has damaged Candace's ability to trust, to feel safe. Jeane reads. She goes to conferences on adoption and its invisible wounds. She meets other adoptive parents who tell similar stories. Children who push away affection, who test, who provoke. In the hallways of these meetings, people talk about specialized methods, approaches for these difficult children. They exchange book titles. They whisper the names of therapists who call themselves rad experts. Above these individual trajectories, another, broader movement takes shape, like an underground current running through the United States. In the Big Book of Psychiatric Diagnoses, the DSM, reactive attachment disorder exists. It is recognized as a disorder linked to early deprivation, to the absence of stable care in the first years. Cautious recommendations encourage treatment based on safety, time, consistency. Nowhere in this manual do we find prescriptions for restraint, suffocation, symbolic rebirth. Yet on the margins of mainstream psychiatry, something else is growing. In the 1980s and 1990s, in the high country of Colorado and in a few other states, currents develop that call themselves attachment therapy. Practitioners, sometimes holding a social work license, sometimes less trained, offer intensive therapies for struggling adopted children. Testimonies, investigations, and reports by professional associations describe controversial physical practices: confinement, strong bodily pressure, holding therapy, guided emotional explosions. Exhausted parents are promised a solution, a rebirth of the bond, through harsh, spectacular methods meant to break the child's resistance. In Colorado, before the year 2000, no law yet draws a clear boundary. No specific regulations prohibit these so-called rebirthing therapy or compression therapy techniques. In this legal vacuum, some practices prosper. Among them, a center in Evergreen, a town nestled in the mountains west of Denver. There, therapy is tinged with quasi-mystical vocabulary: symbolic birth, regression, renewal. Candace's fate shifts when the name of a woman reaches Jeane Newmaker. Connell, or Connie, Watkins. Newspapers later describe her as a former social worker, holder of a social work license, practicing as an attachment therapist in Evergreen. She is neither a psychiatrist nor a licensed clinical psychologist, but she presents herself confidently as a rad specialist. In the accounts, it is no longer very clear which professional or network of therapists extended this thread between Durham and Evergreen. All we know is that it exists. One day, Jeane receives a name, a contact, a promise. Around Connell Watkins, a small group works. There is Julie Ponder, an associate therapist who takes part in the most intense sessions, including those of rebirthing. There is an office, or a center, in Evergreen where adopted children from different states are seen. Testimonies from former patients and police investigations will later recount sessions of compression, wrapping, simulation of birth. Children wrapped in blankets, held tightly, subjected to physical pressure meant to force them to struggle to be born, to open up to a new bond. In the Durham home, the years pass, and the tensions between Jeane and Candace sharpen. The relational difficulties do not subside. The anger, the resistance, this constant feeling for Jeane of never reaching the heart of her adopted daughter. One day, she makes a decision that, in the moment, seems to her like a last resort. She will go where they claim to know how to treat these children wounded by abandonment. She will go to Colorado. It is April 2000. Spring is rising in the trees of North Carolina, while a plan is taking shape. Jeane organizes the trip. Tickets, dates, suitcases. Judicial documents record traces of this journey. An adoptive mother and her 10-year-old daughter, Candace Elizabeth Newmaker, leave Durham for Evergreen. They are not going on vacation. They are going to an intensive attachment therapy program run by Connell Watkins. High in Colorado, the mountains stretch out their bluish silhouettes. The air is drier, colder. Candace and Jeane move into temporary lodging close to Watkins's office. The week is planned. Several days of sessions, increasingly deep, increasingly physical. At the center, figures take their places around Candace. Connell Watkins, leader of the therapy. Julie Ponder, her associate. Britta St. Clair, assistant. Jack McDaniel, intern or aide. And Jeane herself, sometimes invited to participate, sometimes to observe, sometimes to withdraw. From the very first days, the therapy does not resemble what one sees in ordinary offices. The holding therapy sessions confine Candace in the arms of adults who squeeze her, restrain her, provoke her emotionally. Video recordings prior to the fatal session show these moments of struggle, of coercion. Candace cries, resists, protests. She is pushed to express her anger, her fear. She is restrained. The technique is based on the idea that through this intensity, the child will give in, let down her defenses, and finally accept attachment. Jeane observes. She sees the tears, hears the pleas. She later reports that she perceives Candace's resistance, her distress, but that she is reassured. The therapists tell her this is normal, that they must persevere, that these crises are the necessary passage toward healing. So she continues. She trusts them. Here, no doctor monitors the children's vital signs. No monitoring. No independent medical presence. Experts, later, before the judges, will emphasize this void around a practice that is nonetheless physically intense, where breathing, pressure, and the entire body are engaged. At the core of this program, one ritual occupies the central place: the rebirthing session. It is scheduled for April 18, 2000. That day, in the house office of Connell Watkins in Evergreen, everything is being prepared. The goal, say the therapists, is clear. It is to make Candace be born again, symbolically. To have her go through birth once more in order to recreate the bond with her adoptive mother. Candace must fight to be born, emerge from a cocoon that will play the role of uterus, to find, outside, Jeane, waiting for her like a mother at the moment of delivery. A salvation scenario, in their words. But no independent psychiatrist has validated this protocol. No recognized institution endorses it. No official guideline regulates it. It is a fringe invention, a makeshift, dangerous practice wrapped in the varnish of pseudo-therapeutic language. On April 18th, the room fills. The watches mark an hour that no one will ever forget. Present are Candace, 10 years old, Connell Watkins, who is in charge, Julie Ponder, Britta St. Clair, Jack McDaniel, and Jeane, present at the beginning, then sometimes outside the room, depending on the version. A mattress is placed on the floor. Pillows are arranged. A blanket or sheet is spread out. These are domestic, neutral, ordinary objects. They will become the instruments of a torment that no one yet calls by that name. The session is filmed. A camera rolls, implacable, recording every word, every breath, every minute. This document will later become the centerpiece of the prosecution. But for now, it is just a tape running, silent, while the adults' voices fill the room. Candace is asked to lie down on the mattress. She is wrapped in the blanket, tight, rolled up, the ends held firmly. The mass of fabric becomes, in the fiction of the ritual, a uterus. The adults take their places around her, on her. They sit, lie down, press. Their combined weight compresses the child's body. They call these contractions. In reality, it is sustained pressure on a small rib cage, on fragile lungs. The session begins. The recorded voices describe the moment with a precision that no one will ever be able to erase. Very quickly, inside the blanket, Candace's voice rises. "I can't breathe. I can't breathe." She repeats it. "I'm going to die. Je vais mourir. Please stop. S'il vous plaît, arrêtez." She says again, "I'm going to throw up." She signals the nausea, the lack of air. Each sentence passes through the blanket, crosses the space, reaches the adult's ears. But these ears are occupied by another belief. The therapists, convinced they are facing resistance, minimize, deny, reframe. They reply that children often say that these words are part of the process. That to be born, Candace must push harder, struggle more. Push harder, they say. Continue. Fight. They encourage her to fight, without seeing that, under their weight, the child is no longer fighting for a symbol, but for oxygen itself. The pressure continues. Not for a few seconds, not for a few minutes. The estimates converge on a prolonged duration. 40 minutes, perhaps more. More than an hour of almost uninterrupted compression. Under the blanket, the air runs out. The heart races, then slows. The brain desperately demands the oxygen that no longer comes. Little by little, Candace's voice weakens. Her protests grow rare, then fall silent. In the transcripts, at a certain point, a void appears. No more response, no more words. The adults, however, persist. They interpret this silence as another form of resistance, a withdrawal, a feint. They prolong the fictitious birth, while inside, real life is tipping over. Finally, something alerts them. The total absence of reaction, the immobility. They decide to open the blanket to undo this cocoon turned shroud. When they free Candace, she no longer speaks. She no longer reacts. Her body is inert. Her lips, her skin, take on that bluish hue that later will bear a name in the medical reports: cyanosis. She is no longer breathing effectively. Her heart is faltering. Panic suddenly replaces certainty. They call 911. The time is recorded in the emergency logs. Frantic voices describe an unconscious child. Sirens cross Evergreen, cut through the calm of the mountains. The paramedics arrive, discover Candace, begin resuscitation maneuvers on site. Chest compressions, ventilation. The shock of seeing a small body like this in a house where people spoke of therapy. Candace is transported to the hospital, in Evergreen or to Denver, depending on the reports. The ER doors open. The medical team takes over. The emergency physicians note the cardiorespiratory arrest, severe hypoxia, probable brain damage. She is placed on a ventilator. She is admitted to the pediatric intensive care unit. In this unit, time stands still. Machines, tubes, alarms. Skilled hands fight against the damage caused by mechanical asphyxiation. But some battles cannot be won. On April 19, 2000, one day after the session, Candace dies. 10 years old. A decade of existence ends on a sheet of autopsy report, signed by the coroner of Jefferson County, Colorado. Cause of death? Asphyxiation by compression. Cardiorespiratory arrest. Irreversible brain lesions. The promised rebirth has turned into annihilation. The death of a child in an office that calls itself therapeutic cannot remain in the shadows. By legal obligation, the hospital reports the case as a suspicious death. The Colorado authorities set in motion. The Jefferson County Sheriff's Office seizes the video of the session, Candace's files, the therapist's notes, the material used. Each pillow, each blanket, becomes a piece of evidence. Investigators question Connell Watkins, Julie Ponder, Britta St. Clair, Jack McDaniel, and Jeane Newmaker herself. Watkins and Ponder's therapeutic activities are suspended, at least long enough to understand. The facts, however, are already etched on the videotape. The prosecutors watch it. They hear Candace's voice begging for her life. They observe the adults' reactions. They see the duration of the compression. They read the autopsy report. Then a decision takes shape. The Jefferson County prosecutor chooses to bring criminal charges against those who, that day, held the child's body confined. The indictments name Connell Watkins and Julie Ponder as the main responsible parties. The primary charge: child abuse resulting in death. A Class II felony in Colorado. Britta St. Clair and Jack McDaniel are also implicated, for lesser counts: complicity, participation. The role of Jeane Newmaker is examined. Did she see? Did she understand? Was she deceived? The prosecutor ultimately does not charge her with homicide. He considers that she was abused by the therapists, that she believed, wrongly, in the legitimacy and the safety of the method. The scandal breaks in the press like an explosion. In April 2000, the local newspapers, then national, then international, relay the story of this little girl who died of suffocation during a rebirthing therapy session. The video, without being broadcast in full, is described in detail. People talk about a child who repeats, "I can't breathe," while adults sit on her. Public opinion shudders with outrage, with incomprehension. How, under the cover of therapy, could such clear pleas have been ignored? Medical and psychiatric authorities speak out. They condemn this rebirthing therapy as unscientific, dangerous, contrary to all ethics. They remind everyone that reactive attachment disorder has never justified such practices. Professional associations and child advocacy organizations rise up against these coercive methods. The name Candace quickly becomes a warning cry. Jeane Newmaker appears in some media outlets. She talks about her shock, her guilt, the trust she had placed in Watkins and Ponder. She admits having attended sessions, having seen things she did not fully understand, having believed they were necessary. Her words add another layer of tragedy, that of a mother who, seeking to heal, delivered her child into mortal danger. In 2001, the drama moves from the intimate sphere to the solemnity of a courtroom. The trial of Connell Watkins and Julie Ponder opens at the District Court of Jefferson County. In the room are the lawyers, the families, the journalists. On the benches, the memory of Candace sits, invisible but imposing. The evidence parades by. The full video of the April 18, 2000 session is shown. The jurors see the pillows, the blanket, the adults who sometimes laugh or insist. And at the center, a child's voice growing weaker. The autopsy report is read, detailing the injuries, the cause of death, the precise mechanism of asphyxiation. Jeane testifies. Brita St. Clair testifies. Jack McDaniel, the paramedics, the doctors, all recount a fragment of the puzzle. Experts in child psychiatry and pediatrics take the stand. They explain the dangers of compression, the risks of restricting a child's breathing, the complete lack of scientific basis for these rebirthing techniques. Watkins and Ponder's defense clings to one idea. They did not mean to kill Candace. They claim they simply applied a method they believed to be therapeutic for RAD. They say they were, until then, convinced of the validity of this approach. But faced with the video, the ignored pleas, the repeated complaints of not being able to breathe, this defense runs up against the raw reality of the facts. The verdict is handed down. Connell Watkins is found guilty of child abuse resulting in death and of other counts related to child maltreatment. Julie Ponder receives the same verdict on the main count. The sentence is heavy. 16 years in prison for each of them. 16 years to answer for those 40 minutes, that hour of compression, that were enough to destroy a life. Brita St. Clair and Jack McDaniel, for their part, reach plea agreements with the prosecutor. They acknowledge their involvement, accept lesser charges. Their sentences are lighter. Reduced prison time, sometimes probation, professional bans. Less time behind bars, but the permanent mark of having participated in that session. While justice punishes, institutions learn lessons. Professional mental health associations issue official condemnations of rebirthing therapy. The American Psychiatric Association, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, among others, reaffirm that these practices have no scientific basis, that they are dangerous, that they must be banned. Child advocacy NGOs seize on the case to denounce all coercive attachment therapies, compressions, simulated suffocation, prolonged pressure. In Colorado, lawmakers look into the legal gray area that allowed such practices to flourish. A proposal emerges, a law to explicitly prohibit these techniques. It is crafted with Candace in mind. In 2001, the Colorado legislature adopts a bill that draws a red line. Candace's Law. Candace's Law. Its content is clear. It prohibits any rebirth or similar therapy that consists of wrapping a child in blankets, sheets, or materials while exerting pressure likely to restrict their breathing. These acts are now classified as child abuse, punishable under criminal law. The law applies to everyone, anyone, whether professionally licensed or not, who practices such methods exposes themselves to prosecution. Candace's name is written into the text, into the debates, into the very nickname of the law. Beyond Colorado, other states watch and reflect. In North Carolina, in some western states, similar bills are being discussed. There is talk of more strictly regulating attachment therapies, of banning physical rebirthing. Not all of them see it through. There is no single federal law across the United States that bans these practices. But Candace's story becomes an argument in national discussions about abuse in a therapeutic context. In universities, in professional alliances, in ethics committees, her name comes up again and again. Academic articles examine the case as an extreme example of deadly therapeutic drift. They stress the importance of evidence-based practices, of the vigilance needed when unvalidated, spectacular methods promise miracles. Regulatory bodies strengthen their warnings against physical restraints, bodily pressure, anything that can restrict a child's breathing, even in the name of birth symbolism. Rebirthing therapy recedes from the public spotlight. It withdraws, becomes more discreet, whispered about in fringe circles. Officially, it is no longer defensible. Unofficially, related practices persist, according to later investigations, in obscure corners, far from cameras, far from courts. But they now know that a name precedes them, as a warning.